All right, hello everyone. My name is Lucas Weaver. I'm working with a relativistic heavy ion group with the Professor we're having there. The title of my project is quantifying and correcting background distortion from the lunar jet plane. So everyone you just heard from before from the relativistic heavy ion group, they were talking about preparing like procedures and detectors for the upcoming epic detector at the EIC. My project is on a later stage of analysis. So once we've like measured like the actual charges and gotten momentum vectors of the particles coming out of these collisions, we want to look at the events as a whole and try and understand like what's going on in the collisions, what forces are at play in those interactions. So the motivation of my project is to study the quark gluon plasma. This is a state of matter where protons and neutrons, which are comprised of quarks and gluons, it's an extremely high energy density state, and they dissociate into their constituent quarks and gluons, forming a liquid that is largely governed by strong force interactions. So we hope to study the quark gluon plasma to learn more about the strong force. The way we study the quark gluon plasma is we know that particles that travel through the quark gluon plasma lose momentum and are scattered from their original trajectories. So by studying the particles that come out of the quark gluon plasma, we can learn about the quark gluon plasma, which will tell us stuff about the strong force. So the way we really do these analyses are using jets. Jets are collimated showers of single origin particles. I work with heavy ion collisions, and when partons from instant nuclei hit each other dead on, they collide, sending two quarks or vector bosons with high transverse momentum relative to the beams. These particles that have been shot up from this dead-on collision quickly decay into a shower of smaller particles, and it's these smaller particles that hit our detectors and tell us what's going on in the event. Let's skip that. So once you have one of these jets, you found these particles that come from the jet. There are a few analyses you can do. You can do like simple ones, like how much momentum does the jet have, gives you one number, or you can do more in-depth analyses, like you can look at the jet substructure, which is basically the order in which the particles of the jet branched and split off. A tool that we use to analyze this jet substructure is called the lunar jet plane. The way it works is you take your initial jet, you find the first splitting, you find the angle between those two splittings, you call that delta, and then you find the momentum of the softer splitting relative to the harder splitting. You call that relative momentum KT. Then we put that we plot those points on the lunar plane with a log 1 over delta on the x-axis and log relative momentum on the y-axis. We do that for each splitting. Do that for many jets, for many splittings. You populate the lunar plane with its average density. This tells you what kind of splittings are going on in your jet. We hope to use this tool to find out the effect that the quark gluon plasma has on jets. The problem is that these jets are happening in the context of a much larger heavy ion collision. The rest of the collision throws many small momentum thermal background particles into the mix, which are incorrectly clustered as jet particles. And in general, they add to the jet's full momentum and they obscure its substructure. What we need is an algorithm that can take all the hits on our detectors, the black and red areas, and tell us which hits are actually from particles that we're interested in, black areas. So that these jet subtraction techniques, there are many well-established algorithms. Some of them do pretty simple things, like they just try and recover the true momentum of the jet, so they return with one number. Others are a little more complicated. They try and actually recover the true jet substructure. Tell you which particles are background events, which particles are background particles, and which ones are from the jet that you're interested in. What we wanted to do is see if any of these algorithms work well enough to restore closure in the lunar plane, whether they would recover the jet substructure well enough that we have a lunar plane that matches what the jet really is. So that brings me to the question for my project. Can we recover the true lunar jet plane from underneath the heavy ion thermal background? What this requires is a place where we have a set of particles and we know which particles are background particles, which particles are jet particles. We don't have this in data because that's where we're trying to figure this out. So we use simulations. I use the Pythia 8 event simulator to simulate proton-proton collisions, which give us the jets that we're looking for. This gives us just like a bunch of momentum vectors from the jet of interest. I then generate heavy ion-like thermal backgrounds using specs from real Alice experiments. For each event, we sample from distributions to tell us how many particles are going to be in this background, what their momentum are, and what the distributions in space are going to be, to ones. That gives us much more momentum vectors, now in the red. Now our simulation is complete. We have particles that we expect to see in data, but we know which ones are from the jet and which ones are from the background. Next, we apply our subtraction techniques to evaluate how well they work. I've highlighted 4 here that I'm going to talk about today. I'll go over them briefly. Constituent subtraction makes small momentum subtractions from each particle in the jet, hoping to subtract away the background contribution to the overall jet momentum. Recursive soft drop picks a momentum threshold and gets rid of all particles below that threshold under the assumption that background particles have lower momentum than jet particles. Excuse me, that one was soft killer. Soft killer picks the momentum threshold and removes all particles below that. Recursive soft drop recursively moves. Oh, awesome, thank you. Wide angle radiation, which is used from the background. And then my own, the perpendicular cone constituent subtraction, samples particles that are 90 degrees away from the jet of interest, and uses that to estimate the background. Once we apply the subtraction techniques, it gives us a new subset of particles. Then we compare the lumen planes from the true event and the recovered event, see how well they're doing. One trick that we use when comparing the lumen planes is we look at the full lumen plane, which is what we discussed before, and the groomed lumen plane, which is where we apply the soft drop condition. Basically, for each splitting, if the splitting is too wide an angle, we discard it because we assume that that splitting is actually from background radiation. So that gives us only closer angle splittings. And then we also look at jet momentum cuts because low momentum jets are difficult to teleport from the background, while high momentum jets easily stand out. All right, I'm gonna get to my results. This is the truth level event from the Pythia generation. This is groomed lumen plane on the left, ungroomed on the left, groomed on the right. Two things I'll point out in the ungroomed plane is we have this patch up here. There's a small amount of underlying event from the proton-proton collision, which is similar to the underlying event happening in the heavy ion collision. This one comes from the proton-proton collision that we're interested in. And then this area up here is from some perturbative QCD effects. This is more so the jet that we're interested in. These are just some different jet momentum slices. So we see at low momentum, the perturbative QCD region is down here at high angles. This is 1/r on the x-axis. And then at higher momentum, we see that region move off to the right. At higher momentum, that region happens at small angles. Next, we can look at the background. We see that once you add the background, it really obscures what we're looking for. At low momentum, you just have this stripe that's all from background particles. At higher momentum, you start to see this perturbative QCD region that we're interested in, but it's still heavily obscured behind this wide angle radiation. Now we look at some of the background removal techniques. This is low momentum. You see that basically all of them still have that big smear from the background. We get to higher momentum. We start to see that soft pillar and constituent subtraction are starting to get what looks like to be the perturbative QCD region, but still heavily obscured behind background. That's why we look at the groomed lumen plane, which gets rid of that wide angle radiation. When we do that, again, low momentum, we don't see much, but then higher momentum, and we see that that region in soft pillar and subtraction was indeed the perturbative QCD region that we were looking for in the true event. So the groomed lumen planes for constituent and subtraction and soft pillar, we are able to recover the true event. And then we can make cuts along constant y and x values to really see how well something is doing, the different methods are doing. I'll jump to this one. We see most of the techniques perform well at low angles, but at high angles where there's a lot of background particles, they're really all over the place. When we look at the groomed lumen plane, it gets rid of those wide angles. Now we see a very good match between the true lumen plane and other methods. So in conclusion, we find that it is possible to recover the lumen plane, but it depends on the situation. So the ungroomed or the full lumen plane, your best bet is using constituent subtraction. Works best for jets of momentum of 100 gigaelectron volts or higher. We see that it gets the perturbative QCD region. It's getting a little bit of the proton-proton underlying event, but there's still the smear here from the background. But if you're looking for the groomed lumen plane, you can do a lot better. Soft killer basically recovers the full groomed lumen plane as for jets momentum with momentum as low as 60 gigaelectron volts, which is really good, better than we were expecting. And then our runner-up for the groomed lumen plane is constituent subtraction, which also gets there, but it requires slightly higher energy jets to make the distinction. So looking forward, some questions we might ask are, can we ever recover the full lumen jet plane? Not just the perturbative QCD region, but also the proton-proton underlying event region. The difficulty there is that the proton-proton underlying event region, those particles are difficult to distinguish from the background particles because they have the same momentum and similar distributions. So we might ask, can we recover that proton-proton underlying event from the lumen plane? There are some things, some questions to ask are whether there are things that the distribution of these underlying event particles depend on that we're just not aware of yet. Like maybe there's a dependence on their angle from the primary jet axis. They might be influenced by neighboring jets, or they might be organized with predictable patterns within the true jets, things that we just don't know because we haven't tried them yet. One suggestion I have is a neural network trained on simulation data might be able to pick up on some metrics that aren't obvious to us and really be able to distinguish or at least make good educated guesses between true background particles and proton-proton underlying event particles. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so I looked at the axes are the same scale, right?
The X and Y axes are all the same. The Y axes vary a little bit with labels right here.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious if you have an intuition why the recursive soft drop seems so much denser along the line that yeah.
Yeah, I was confused there as well. I mean, I do understand that this line is definitely from the background particles, and it follows this line from wide R high momentum to low R low momentum. Because background particles that are far away from the jet axis are going to cluster with each other first and form high momentum pseudojets that are then clustered with the main jet axis. That's why wide R has high momentum. I'm not sure. I think constituent subtraction and soft killer are actually eliminating particles from the event in a more uniform way. Recursive soft drop is really just getting things mostly around the edges. So I guess there's background particles that are closer to the center of the jet axis that recursive soft drop doesn't really pick up on. So the backgrounds come from specs that we've seen in real Alice heavy ion collisions. Here they are. So like we know how many particles are using these backgrounds, what their momentums are, and what their distributions in angular space are. So like we have these distributions that just define those things. For every background we want to generate, we just sample from distributions to find out what the momentum and distribution of each particle is going to be like.
Thank you.
Okay.